afternoon, good evening. Welcome to another episode of Indie Reads TV presented by Pages Promotions. We're really happy today to have an extraordinary gentleman in the shop. He is the owner, proprietor, book knowledge expert from Toadvine Books. He is Luke Janes. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of really cool stuff. This is a really fun episode for me because it's about an indie bookshop, which holds a special place in my heart. So, Luke, thank you very much for coming. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
I am so excited that you were here today. I can't even begin to tell you. I know your shop just opened May 11th.
That's right.
And you're in Berkeley, Coolidge, and 12 Mile, correct?
Coolidge and Catalpa.
Catalpa.
So it's kind of 11 and a half mile. So.
Okay, it's just south of 12 Mile.
Right.
Okay. I know your background, you know, we were talking earlier, your background is you come from the Denver area and you had a shop out there. Can you talk a little bit about that experience?
Oh, yeah. Well, originally I'm from Michigan, the Saline, Ann Arbor area. But then I moved out to Denver in the early 2000s and then opened a bookshop there with my friend and business partner, Dan Stafford, in 2008.
Okay.
So ran that shop until about 2015, I believe. Sold it to our friend and employee at the time, and then moved back to Michigan, where I've wanted to open another bookshop since then. So. Okay.
So how's the transition been coming from, you had this great, wonderful, successful bookshop. People knew about you. You had a regular following, regular clientele. Now you're pretty much starting over again in Berkeley. How's that been? I know that you made all the shelves from scratch. I was really impressed to see that you were doing all this. Your elbow grease is really running out of steam, I would think, at this point.
Well, if books are involved, it's always fun.
So how's the transition been coming from an established shop to starting over, essentially?
Oh, yeah. Well, it is a little bit difficult. Very different demographics from the Capitol Hill area of Denver, where my old shop was, to the Berkeley area. It's more families around Berkeley, whereas Denver was more of, I guess, a younger, hip area in the Capitol Hill portion of the city. And so the biggest part is just trying to get to know the area, get to know the people here, what they're looking for in a bookstore, because I think a good shop kind of has to represent the needs of the neighborhood.
Sure.
So that's been a process. I've lived here for about 3 years, next door to Berkeley in Huntington Wood. So I've met a lot of nice people. It's a great neighborhood, a lot of book lovers.
So on this journey that you started this brand new bookshop, you found this great little space. I love the combination of the brick exterior and the wood interior. That's just fabulous. It just feels so organically perfect for books. So you walk in and you have this wonderful about books. It's almost like traveling into a library that somebody has personally curated. And I know that you have curated many of these books personally. You have some really old special editions that we're going to talk about in just a minute. But throughout this process, what was the thing about opening a bookshop that just really sparked your imagination and that you wanted to do it a second time? What was the thing that really made you go, wife, family, we're going to do this again, and it's going to be fun because? What was the because?
Well, I feel like books are almost in my blood at this point. I love the business of books, and I love, obviously books themselves and the reading books. And I think the biggest thing is I love book people, too. I love the interaction, and I love people coming to visit the shop and getting to talk books with them. So I was really itching for that, too. And it's also a nice way to get to know your neighbors. So I love books, and I like meeting people in the neighborhood who love books, too. Yeah.
So if you were in the corporate world, and I know we both cringe when we hear that, corporate world. If you were in the corporate world, what would you think you might imagine yourself as a librarian, or do you think is there another part of your life aside from books that might draw you to a career outside of books?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've been in the book business for so long that it's hard to imagine being outside of it. Although I do love, cooking, I love baking, so maybe something along the lines of cookbooks or, something like that. But
Culinary arts chef extraordinaire.
yeah, right. But it really is hard to imagine not being in the book business at this point. So.
Yeah. After doing it for as long as you have, I would think that imagining it like imagining not having your child would be something that you might struggle with.
Yeah, that's
just
a
a
good
little
analogy.
bit.
Yeah.
I know I feel the same way about books every time. I'm still one of those people that cries when I think about the Library of Alexandria. It's such a loss.
Right, exactly.
Oh, such a loss. So, what are the hardest books to curate when you've only got 1,200 square feet? Is that about right?
It's about 1,500 square feet. Yeah.
So when you're curating books, what makes the cut? What makes you decide what's going to stay on the shelves and what's maybe going to get donated to a worthy cause?
Well, that's always the tricky part, and it's always a kind of a learning process as you go. Some book I might think, oh, that's a fantastic book. Someone's going to come in tomorrow and pick it up. And then 3 years later, it's gathering dust. And so it's a process of just trying to find the needs of the book buyers around you, see what they're looking for, and it's just kind of a always evolving process. Finding these are good books from this genre. This is the kind of book that so and so is looking for. I know this customer will love this one.
So it's not just a matter of getting to know the books, but it's a matter of getting to know the people and the books as integral pieces that work together as part of the same machine, rather than these are widgets and I can sell widgets.
Right, exactly. And it really is a different dynamic for every shop. So I'll if I know one bookstore and they'll say, oh, I've been looking for that book. I've got so-and-so looking for that one. So, it's been on my shelf for 5 years. Have at it.
Please,
so,
have this book.
It's kind of fun.
So you brought a couple of books with you today as really, I think, fine examples of the variety and the true care that goes into the books that you put into your shop. I've been in there several times now, and every time I walk in, I think, oh my goodness, I'm going to just spend so much money here.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Because you're so careful about what you put on the shelves. And I know that you have the one case up front that has some pretty special pieces in it. You brought one with us. Can you show that to us?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, as a bookshop, you always do have to have a good mix of just a nice reading copy, but it's also neat to have some interesting first editions. And this is one of those that's in the glass case. It's called The Rabbit's Wedding. It's by Garth Williams, who illustrated a lot of great children's books, including Charlotte's Web, Stuart Little, the Little House on the Prairie books. And this one's interesting. It is a first edition, and it's signed by him, but it produced a lot of controversy at the time. It came out in 1958, and in Alabama there was a big protest that it was some kind of integration propaganda because of the color of the rabbits. They're frolicking around, and then they eventually get married. And Garth Williams says, "Oh no, that wasn't my intention." It probably was.
And it was actually a banned book.
In Alabama, in the state of Alabama, yeah.
That's stunning. I just want to show our viewers a little bit of this artwork because it's just so beautiful. I hope we can see it. There we go. It's just so lovely. The detail in it is just gorgeous.
Oh, yeah. And the kind of muted colors, just beautiful.
Yeah. So, so what year did you say this book was?
1958, I believe.
And just for fun and because I know people are going to ask, a range. A range of, if you were going to say inexpensive, mid-range, or expensive or highly expensive, where would you put a book like this without putting a number on it?
Sure, it's a little bit mid-range. It's in the 3 figures, but
okay.
It's a pretty hard one to find with the dust jacket and the signature.
Yeah, and because it is a first edition signed copy, that's pretty special.
Right, and now it's a very popular book. I think it's been in print pretty much since it came out. So
wow,
it's a really nice book.
It's lovely. I'm so glad you brought that today. What's the other piece that you brought?
Oh yeah, so a big part of my vision for the store is to carry local writers, and as this one is, local writers of any age. So this is a young girl. Her name is Eliza Stewart, and this is the zine she created. It's a collection of writing and pictures, so stories, poetry, some of her pictures. And this is something really anyone can do. If you write, you have a poem that you've written, whether it's typed out or on a Post-it note, you can put it together in a neat little collection.
Turn that a little bit. There we go. So this is a young woman. She's middle school age?
Oh, she's in grade school.
Grade school? Mm-hmm. Okay. And she put together this book because she loves writing. Mm-hmm. And anybody can do this. I love the artwork in this book. This is just fabulous that she was able to put this together. Yeah. Look at that. That's just stunning stuff.
Yeah, she's really talented. She's quite incredible. Yeah.
Now, you used a term that we don't hear a lot of. Or let me see if I can rephrase that. You use a term that we normally associate with internet publications, which is zine. Mm-hmm. So can you talk a little bit about the vocabulary, about where that comes from, what it means to people who maybe are unfamiliar?
Oh, sure. Zine is basically just short for magazine, and it's short, and historically it's usually self-published, Xeroxed, stapled together, and it's a mishmash of different mediums, either painting, photography, writing, and it's really anything you want it to be. And it's usually self-published, so you can put it together yourself, maybe print it at your local library, and then either hand them out, trade them, find a local shop you can sell them at or give them away to. So it's kind of a fun medium. You
have quite a few of these in your shop. There's a section in the back of your shop that's devoted to children's books, and there's one whole wall that's zines.
Yeah, that's right.
And comic books.
Yeah, it's the more small press comics and zines. And now the small press comics are often kind of like a zine where it's one person who draws and writes the comics, and it can be about anything, autobiographical, just storytelling, and simply published too. It's not something that the Diamond catalog that carries the superhero stuff would carry.
Mm-hmm. Something just came to mind. We were speaking earlier with another author, Joan Young, as she was wrapping up her time here in our studio. Mm-hmm. And we caught her in the hallway, and we were talking about the changes that are happening now in the book world. Mm-hmm. And in the world of bookshops, in particular, with all of the upheaval with Barnes & Noble in recent weeks. How does that affect what you do as a bookshop owner? How does the bigger picture and what the big publishing houses are doing affect you as an independent author? How do you make decisions, or do you change the way you operate? Maybe you don't.
Well, yeah, it's still hard to see where it's all going, but I do think that there is still a lot of opportunity as far as the small press, this like the zines and the small press comics. Most places don't really carry those, and they're not easily accessible either. You can't just order a bunch from a catalog. You kind of have to know the comics world or the zine world and reach out to those authors to be able to get them in your shop. So it's kind of a cool thing in that respect. But as far as the larger book model or bookstore model goes, I guess we're still waiting to see where it goes. There are still a lot of people who love their local bookshop who go and support the bookshop. And I think as long as these shops can support the community as well, doing readings, having local authors come by, I think there's still a great dynamic there. So.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with you. And as we've talked before, I'm madly in love with the indie book world. It's why we do this program.
Oh, yeah.
So what are you interested in you've got, a 2 or 3 year lease on your shop. So what are you looking at over the long term? What are some of the evolutionary steps you'd like to see take place with your shop as time goes on?
I guess just doing more of local events. Still have a strong shop, a great selection of books, but being tighter knit with the community, getting to know more authors, more of the neighborhood to see what their needs is. So I guess just doing more of the same. At this point, we'll see where it goes.
And you have a small section. I'm proud to say my books are on your shelves.
Oh yeah.
And we have some other authors that are also authors who have done this program who are on your shelves as well. I'm very pleased that you're offering us this opportunity. I feel very honored that you're willing to work with independent authors. Do you see that section of your shop growing, or are you going to kind of wait and see what the demand holds out? What's your plan for working with independent authors?
Well, my plan is to keep it growing as long as there is interest. And you tell me thank you, but I also say the same thank you for wanting to put your books on my shelf. I feel privileged that authors would want to come to the shop and put their inventory, put their books on my shelves.
How could we not? Your shop is spectacular, I must say. Like I said at the top of the show, I'm thrilled with your shop. I walked in and I was so pleasantly surprised. You certainly know what you're doing. And the shop feels warm and cozy and comfortable, and I just want to spend hours and thousands of dollars. And if there were some pearls of wisdom or cautionary tales that you might offer someone who wanted to open up a bookshop, you've got a lot of experience in this area. So what are some of the things you might warn someone about or encourage someone about should they want to open a bookshop? I mean, now that Barnes & Noble is changing their model, we may have a greater opportunity for more independent bookshops, and somebody watching the show today may say, hey, maybe that's something I can do. How would you mentor those people?
Well, I think the biggest thing is you do have to take it pretty seriously. It's not just hobby that you casually say, I think I'd like to open a bookshop. Well, it can start with that, but it takes a lot of work to get to know the books, to get to know the people, and to have a good supply of books in your shop. So I think if you are passionate about it and really want to put in the footwork to market yourself, to have a great shop, it is quite a bit of work. It's not an easy thing to open.
Yeah, as with any business, right? No matter what industry you're in, there's going to be some sweat equity involved.
Yeah, and then as well as a little bit of luck too.
Yeah, a lot of luck.
Yeah.
You mentioned marketing. Marketing is one of those things that's really key for an author. How do you think that marketing differs from a bookshop rather than any other business?
Yeah,
I mean, are there secrets?
I don't know about secrets. Although you've been in the business for a while too, so you know quite a few of the maybe secrets. But it's more. I think a lot of it is word of mouth. When you're a local bookshop, friends in the neighborhood know each other, and they tell each other, "Oh, I found this great book," or "My friend is an author. Go see his or her title on the store. You can pick it up at so-and-so bookshop."
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the great thing about a neighborhood bookshop is the connections you make with people. And it can really, those small connections and here and there someone buying your book or seeing your shop, it really adds up.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah. For me, as a reader, I love walking into a small bookshop because the owner knows what he has and can make recommendations. You made a fabulous recommendation to me last week for a book, and I started reading it over the weekend, and now I'm completely hooked, and I have to come to the shop and get the next two books in the series.
That's
Thank you very much. But that's one of the greatest things I think about having that neighborhood bookstore is that you have somebody that you can count on to lend you that expertise and that knowledge. So, given that, how often do you read, and what do you like to read?
Oh, well, I don't read as much as I'd like to, but hopefully once the shop gets established, I can get back into it.
Yeah, that's the fantasy.
Yeah.
I'm going to sit and wait for people to walk in and read books.
Yeah. So I like reading anything that's written well, of any genre. I grew up reading a lot of science fiction and fantasy, then a lot of classic literature, and a lot of nonfiction and that sort of thing. And then I like some of the local books that I've been reading. I recently read the Death and Life of the Great Lakes, which is a very interesting history of the invasive species of the Great Lakes. It was an excellent book.
So, how often, okay, given the fact that you have to be at the shop every day, every hour of every day, and you are still building the shop. I know you're still putting up some new bookshelves, rearranging things, making things perfect and homey. How often would you say that you get a chance to read? And I know I just recently, for my birthday, was last week, and I just made a new goal to read 2 new books minimum per month.
Oh, that's a good goal.
Yeah. So would you recommend that as a goal, or do you think that's too far-reaching, or am I not reaching far enough, or... You're in this. Your head lives and swims in the world of books. So how would you recommend going about setting up reading goals?
Yeah, I think part of it is, I think everyone has a little bit of distraction with, either internet, digital, or family, or just you have a long work day and it's hard to get into a book when you get back from work. And I think maybe just scheduling time, either in the morning or in the evening, you almost just have to write it down, like, okay, this time I'm going to read.
Yeah, I had to do that. I had to put it in my calendar.
Yeah, it's as simple as that sometimes, I think.
There's an interesting commentary about where our lives have gone if now we have to schedule our downtime, our reading time. I remember in my teenage years curling up with the Sunday newspaper. Back then it was 3 inches thick.
Right.
And, I'd spend all afternoon with a cup of cocoa and the newspaper. Can't do that so much anymore. There's too much else going on. And you with a young child, you have even more going on. So how would you recommend keeping reading in the lives of children? What are some things that we can do to inspire children to continue turning the pages of a book?
Well, I think there's a lot of great programming going on these days at both schools and libraries, from the story time hour at the library. A lot of bookstores have, story time, reading time, which I hope to have one of these days. And I think it's good. It's easy to encourage children to read with a lot of the beautiful books that are coming out too. Beautiful pictures, great stories, and it's kids kind of want that time with their parents of the storytelling. The kids cherish that. So I think it's more up to the adults, the parents, to really make themselves devote a certain amount of time every day to reading to their children.
I remember as a child we were voracious readers, mostly because at one point our television broke and my father refused to fix it for several years. So we spent a lot of time at the library, which I have no regrets about. How would you recommend we create a life balance for our children between screen time and page time?
No, it's a good question, but a very hard thing to answer, and it's probably different for every family, every child. I guess that's maybe something that I'm working on, even with my son. Just making sure it's not too much time on the screen, or in front of the TV. So.
Do you see a generational crossover between books? Do you notice that there are people coming into your shop, and maybe even the shop in Denver? Did you notice people coming into the shop and saying, I read this as a child, I want to give it to my grandchildren?
Mm-hmm.
Do you see that as a universal thing, or do you think it's only pockets of geography where that happens?
I think it's pretty universal. Anything you enjoyed as a kid, you'll always have that memory. You'll always cherish that, and want to give it to your kids or grandkids. Now, at the shop in Denver, there was more of a younger audience, mid-20s to mid-30s.
Okay.
A lot of students. So they were more like, oh, I heard this is great, so I want to read this. A lot more classics. But even someone in their 20s, they're already ready to revisit, Frog and Toad, or some of these great books they read as
Frog
kids.
and Toad.
Mm-hmm.
Frog and Toad. I really like Frog and Toad.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
We've only got a minute and a half or so left of our time today. Are there any interests in your head swimming around to write? Do you have any writing designs?
No, I thought back in the day I might be a writer, but I think I've realized that's not for me.
No? You don't think there's a story in you someplace?
I mean, there are stories, but I don't know that I'm a good enough technical writer to put it down and not on the publishing end.
That's what editors are for.
Yeah, that's true. I'll tell stories to my kids, but
that works.
Yeah.
That works. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you coming in. I'm very, very excited about the bookshop. I really think that this is going to become a family favorite and a staple of the neighborhood, and I'm so glad that you chose us to come back to, because now we can take advantage of all your knowledge of books and a wonderful space to read.
Oh, thank you very much.
I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. And thanks for having me on the show.
You're welcome. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.
Mm-hmm.